Now let's take a deeper dive into how we can use Burp Suite to create our macros. Now, one of the project options that's available to us is the setting of session handling rules. Session handling rules allow you to specify a set of actions that Burp will perform when handling any of your HTTP sessions. Now, first we need to identify exactly where we can set these session handling rules. When you look under the Project Options and the Sessions tab, you will find the Session Handling Rules editor. Now, each rule that you configure in the Session Handling Rules editor must have a defined scope. Now, this scope can be a specific URL, such as what you might define in your target scope, or it can be very broad and include all URLs. Likewise, in that scope, you're going to define which particular Burp tools will carry out your rules. Now, when the conditions for your particular rule are met, your predefined sequence of events will be performed prior to that request being issued. Or, if you set the rule to occur after a certain request, then it would run then. Now, as we'll see in the demo, the sequence of actions can be anything from something predefined to the running of a macro. Now, you will notice that there's a default rule in the Session Handlings Rules section. So with every new Burp instance, you'll always have the start of this one default rule, which is to use cookies that are captured inside of the Burp cookie jar. Now, you can turn off this option if you like, but we're going to take a look in the second demo at how those cookies are captured and the specifics around the information for each cookie. So the cookie jar has some inclusion rules. For example, you can define that you want all the cookies captured except for some specific cookie. Maybe an unauthenticated cookie is not of your interest, for example. Or you can say that you only want to see specific cookies that help you in order to keep your session active, for example. Also, we're going to take a look at the Sessions Tracer. Now, this tracer helps you to monitor or troubleshoot any of the session handling rules that you might set up. Now, this tracer is going to show you a listing of every single request that's been handled by the session handling functionality. Everything that's been captured according to the rules that you set up. Now, for each handled request, this tracer is going to show you all of the steps that were taken in order to execute your particular rule. Now, there's a lot of overhead associated with this tracer, so you only want to use it for troubleshooting purposes. So now let's go ahead and dive right in to look at our session handling rules configuration, both the scope as well as how we can add or manage our rules, as well as a look at the Sessions Tracer. In this demo, we want to see how Burp can help us to build our macros. Now first, let's start with finding our macro editor. If you scroll across the tabs at the top, go to Project Options and go to the Sessions tab. Now in there, you will see that you already have one default session handling rule. It says use cookies from Burp's cookie jar. Now you can certainly unenable this if you like, but let's just take a look at the settings that you have here. If you click the edit button, you'll see that you are going to use cookies that are captured in the cookie jar. Now in the next demo, we're going to take a look more deeply into the cookie jar. For right now, I just want you to realize that this is the default rule that's set, and that its scope is set for Spider and Scanner. Now, why this is important is because as Spider is mapping out an application or Scanner is looking for vulnerabilities, it's going to need to use an active session cookie. And so that's why it's important that those particular areas are in scope. Also in the URL scope, the default setting is to include all URLs. Now you may not want that. You may just want to have the URLs that are defined in your target tab, or what we usually add to scope, or you can set a custom scope. Now, if you close that and you go back to the main editor, let's go ahead and take a look at how we would add a new session handling rule. When you click the Add button, you can provide a name for your rule. Then you're going to provide some sort of sequence of actions that are going to take place. When you click this Add button, you can see that there's numerous options to choose from. So we saw the use cookies from the cookie jar. That's what we just looked at. But we could also set a rule that just sets a specific cookie or perimeter value. Maybe this is something we wanted to use if we had, say, an OAuth token or something like that. Now, this next action, check session is valid, is going to become very handy, and we're going to see it in our demos of how to create a macro. But you would essentially use this if you're spidering or scanning and you happen to accidentally hit some sort of error that invalidates your session. So if that were to happen, you could have this particular rule get invoked. There's also a prompt for in-browser session recovery. Of course, there's the run a macro. This would be to just straight away run your macro. Run a post request macro. This is going to become important when we look at the way that we can defeat CAPTCHA. Or you can invoke a burp extension, which would come under the extender tab. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out is the scope tab for your session handling rules. By default, all of these tabs are in scope. Now, they don't have to be for your rules. You just may want to focus on, say, repeater and intruder. So you could certainly do that. In the URL scope, once again, you may want to refine the particular URL scope or broaden it. And this is similar to our target scoping tab, where we can also exclude URLs from our scope. And then you've got a parameter scope too if you want to be more defined on particular parameters. So this gives you a nice overview of the session handling rules. Now, once you set a rule up, I want you to make note that there's this open sessions tracker. This sessions tracker is designed to help you troubleshoot your session handling rules after you've created them. There is a lot of overhead associated with running this tool, so please use it sparingly. Now let's move forward and go into our next section, looking more closely at our cookie jar.